Things are heating up with Kat. Pete loses his sex shop virginity. And guys, are we about to get Holmes schooled? We've got all that and more here on the Crashing After Show, plus a very, very special guest that I'm very excited about coming up right now.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Little Fitty?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is, in some ways, not quite right for the show, but in some ways, so right for the show.
Like, unbelievably
I feel like
right.
Kat's bringing a lot of cool to this show.
I'm so glad you feel that way.
Yes. In fact, you guys, for you podcast listeners, you're hearing the voice of Madeline Wise herself, who plays Kat on the show. Madeline, we're so excited to have you.
I'm so happy to be here.
Good. And of course, we're so excited about it. I'm not alone because I've also got Mina here.
Hey guys,
Mina, so glad to have you as well.
super excited to be here. I love this week's episode.
I did too.
I'm
I had
so
so many
glad.
thoughts. And guys, you know me. My name is Jeff Graham. Sweet Pete super fan of Crashing, love this show. Today we'll be covering season 3, episode 3, called The Secret. And as always, we start with our overall thoughts. So, Mina, let's start with you. How did you feel about season 3, episode 3, The Secret?
I loved it. I even brought my little The Secret book. I feel like I brought this
Nice.
into the universe.
That? Did you have that already?
No, I literally bought it recently, and I kept thinking, I need a reason to read this. I haven't read it. I need to read it. And the
God.
funniest thing is that I was watching this episode, and it was like a reminder for me to
Yeah.
read it, because I
Yeah.
saw the title, and I was like, it probably has nothing to do with that. And then I kept watching.
You manifested it.
You
Yes,
manifested it.
I
yeah.
literally felt like I manifested
you
it.
set
and
an intention to read that book and then
Everything-
forgot, and then Crashing made that intention.
It seriously did.
reality.
So, like,
I love
everything that
that.
the vision boards that you were talking about that I used to
Yeah.
think is, this is so silly, this is so ridiculous.
Yeah.
I did my vision board already. Everything's done. And
A
then,
lot of people have been tweeting at me like,
Yeah.
I'm making a vision board this weekend. Which is like, I don't know if they're for real, but I support it.
Kat has a way of like emulating behavior that I usually roll my eyes at, but
Yeah.
something about her energy and like her confidence and self-assurance
Yeah.
makes it all so right. I don't know if that
Yeah.
makes sense or not, but
No, I think it's like usually, I feel sort of similarly as like that kind of thing often is a bit of a turnoff, and I'm just like a vision board is like too much. It's too much work, but or it's just like extra, you know.
Yeah.
And but I think there's something. The lesson, I guess, is like you just have to be fully confident, and if you turn off your own bullshit meter, like it disarms other people's bullshit meters. Maybe.
yeah.
I don't know.
No, that's a really good way to put it. There's something like so. I feel like when you first meet Kat, you're like, this could be like the ironic girl who like, you know, like makes fun of the type of people on Instagram that might make you roll your eyes, or
Yeah.
she'd be the kind of person who would like sit down with them and try to have an earnest conversation with them, because she seems to really, kind of like give a shit about the people around her.
Yeah, she's super sincere in
Yeah.
a way that that feels sort of unfamiliar. It certainly is like not something that comes necessarily naturally to me as
Yeah.
a person, and I think is also not what we often see when we see like cool girlfriend characters on
Especially in
TV.
New York. I feel like in
Yeah.
New York, it's like so like, cool. This is more like
Yeah.
almost like a West Coast type of.
I know.
it felt,
she's-
I got Midwestern vibes from her, too. Like,
Yeah.
because you're so sweet. Like,
She's from the East Coast. The character's from the East Coast, as am I.
But
I think
you're
that's
always
just,
like supporting Pete Holmes. Your character's always like just saying like,
know,
you can
she's
do
sweet.
this, you're gonna do, and it was just such a refreshing thing to see. Like someone who's like that confident and still edgy,
Yeah.
but has kindness, because you usually don't see both qualities mixed together. It's usually the
Yeah.
cool girl who's kind of abrasive, or the really sweet girl who never really gets
Yeah.
what she wants.
Yeah, I know. You can have it all.
I guess. I think Kat has it all. Well, in terms
we'll
of today's
find out.
episode, we will be breaking down this episode, of course. I have a special stand-up feature. We're going to be featuring Dave Attell today, of course, because got to honor the king. And then finally, we'll be doing a little spotlight on Madeline. So super excited to pick your brain, not only about this show,
Yeah.
but beyond.
Let's
as
also do
well.
a little spat light. It's
A little spat
It's
light.
like when you have a spat, but it's like
it's light.
it's a light
It's
spat.
not too intense.
Yeah, we don't fight too
A light
much.
spotlight. I love it. Okay, in terms of breaking down the episode, I want to start with Pete and Kat's sort of personal relationship, then talk about professional Pete and how Kat is sort of like worming her way into his professional life, and whether or not it's good or bad, because I think the show was a little ambiguous about how Pete felt about all of this.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to dive into that. And finally, Leaf shows up, and we just have to talk about Leaf.
We always have to talk about Leaf.
Always have to talk about Leaf.
Yeah.
So let's start. Pete and Kat come out with a bang, literally and figuratively, in this episode.
Yeah.
This is interesting. We've never seen Pete so sexually awakened by a character on this show.
Yeah. Little freaky Pete.
Little freaky Pete. How do you feel like both as a character, and then as much as you want to open up about that experience on set would be super interesting for our listeners, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was important to Pete and the writers and everybody to sort of like show this new side of Pete, and it feels like he's just like getting out of the comfort zone that he's existed in for the whole first 2 seasons.
Yeah.
He's a little buttoned up and he's a little nervous, and I think so like the sex and then also going to the sex shop was very much a part of this sort of like we're forcing him to do things that make him uncomfortable. And I mean, well, the sex shop is making him uncomfortable. Presumably the sex is not making him feel uncomfortable. Like it seems like he's enjoying it.
He seems to enjoy it in the episode.
Yeah. Those scenes were really, they were actually like kind of fine to shoot. I was really nervous about that, but we have a lovely, HBO has an intimacy consultant.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
Really lovely woman named Alicia who started out as a fight choreographer, which is sort of a funny thing to realize that those two things are so similar, or can be so similar. And so she was on set, and we just like, while we all still had our clothes on, we like choreographed what the sex moves would be, and then Pete and I both like put on insane little flesh-colored things to cover our
bits.
Our bits. It was like we both just looked like Barbie dolls. Like you just have like a pubic mound where like it's like the same color, but there's just like there's no like Pete was wearing like what I call a banana hammock, where it's just like a flesh-colored sack that everything was in, and I had like a piece of like a large rectangular piece of moleskin that just like like you it's like a bandage, like a sticky bandage that just like went over all of that. And it was nice. It was like they like cleared out the set. It was like just Gillian, our director, and then like our DP, and I think, and maybe there were 2 camera ops. It was 1 or 2 camera ops. Now it's all a blur because it was sort of like weird.
I'm sure.
But there were no sound people. It was like so intimate. And then also Alicia, the intimacy consultant. But it's ultimately fun. And I remember at one point Pete was like, this is so weird because like as your friend, I am trying to prevent you from having like your boobs constantly exposed. So I'm doing this like friendly thing of keeping you decent, but that means that I am putting my hands on your breasts. And I was like, I was grateful, but it's also like, yeah, that is a super bizarre thing to do as a friendly gesture.
It's so funny. Allison Brie was talking about, do you watch Glow?
I watched only the pilot and I loved it, and then I just...
Well, it's actually in the pilot. It's all good. That show's amazing. So definitely go back and check it out.
See it. The cast is incredible.
I love everything about that show, but she was talking about how in her first sex scene, it was like her scene partner who she had worked with for so long was being like so respectful and gentlemanly that she was like a little offended. Yeah. Like, I get that, like, this is friendly, but like, we've got to act here. Like, get into this a little bit. Yeah.
Pete quoted at one point, this was recently, that I think it was when we were in San Francisco doing some press stuff, and Pete quoted Sean Connery, I think, who told his female co-star, he was like, I apologize in advance if I get a hard on, and I apologize if I don't. That's the worst Sean Connery impression in the world.
That's my favorite Sean Connery
I was going to say. I just jumped on my list.
I could probably do a worse one, or I could also do a better one. But I loved that quote because it's sort of like, it's a really weird job is to sort of like pretend to be fucking somebody that you're friends with. But it was lovely, and it was, we had a fun time.
I thought it was tasteful. Like, I thought the show handled it well.
Yeah,
and,
I think that scene turned out, it's like, oh, I'm not mortified to think that, like, you know, everyone who's known me since I was 6 years old is, you know, watching.
Part of the job. I mean, like, again,
job.
and the show's so elegant and well constructed that it's character development, you know? Like, it's
Totally.
because it's significant for Pete. And
Yeah.
like, Mina, I'm wondering, how did you feel seeing our sweet virginal Peter, you know, this awakening? How did you feel about it?
Well, I'm all caught up, so now everything kind of makes sense to me.
If you guys didn't see last week, Mina comes in having only seen season 2, episode 2, and we're talking about. She's just like,
I was
wait,
like,
I
what
thought.
happened? I felt like I went into a coma, and then I woke up, and I was like, all these things happened. What is happening right now?
Yeah. Pete and Allie broke up.
Yeah, what? Oh, no.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, for anyone who goes into a coma and wakes up and just sees how our world is now, I just wonder like how people come to terms with that. But no, I really like the dynamic between you guys. It is so genuine, and it's so weird how quickly it progresses, because usually you think when something is happening that quickly, then it's just gonna fall apart super quickly too, but it feels so solid. And I love how, like, you're always like, oh, 3-week anniversary,
I know.
4-week anniversary.
I know. It's insane.
It's interesting to see how it has become more open sexually as well, because we never really expect that from his character, being like this devout Christian who kind of has a certain way of being. He's like grown a lot, where he's become more open to things that he used to feel was a little taboo. But publicly, he still feels a little bit ashamed.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really hard thing to navigate, and I think it's also part of his development just as a human being, in terms of, like, later on in the season, and this isn't a spoiler, it's been in all the promo stuff, is like he's doing the Christian circuit, like the Christian comedy circuit, and he's sort of trying to figure out if that's like where he really wants to be, and I think the sex stuff is all part and parcel of that, of like he's doing this sort of self-examination, and he's really trying to figure out who he is, and he has not previously really been a person who gets down and dirty. Now I'm thinking it's so appropriate that we started the show with.
You planned that the whole time.
I know, I did. No, I heard it in the car, and I was like, "This is the perfect song."
You
to be
manifested
listening to. I
it,
manifested
is what
it.
happened.
I really like the more. I think The Secret is real. I'm like more and more convinced that The Secret is a totally viable.
I'm like
real thing.
I hate this about myself, but I'm like so the roll your eyes guy with that stuff. And we were talking a bit about horoscopes before the show, but since moving to LA, maybe I'm like a little more open-minded to that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead and move on to the pleasure chest now, because I feel like that's a great tie-in. This is another example of, I think, Kat really opening up Pete's world in a totally non-pushy way.
Yeah.
Which I love. Like, I feel like this is an example where I think maybe Kat wouldn't have expected herself to be with someone like this. But the way it's fun to see you kind of educate Pete in this stuff.
Yeah.
And I love that this was handled so non-judgmentally, which I really appreciated too.
Or, well, what I like actually is that it's like he is kind of being judgmental, and then she calls him on it,
Right.
and which I love. And I also, something that feels cool about that scene is that, or like part of their dynamic is that like Pete is always doing bits, and Kat calls him on it, and she's often like, "Stop doing bits, like this isn't funny. This is a serious thing, and you're making me feel ashamed, and I shouldn't feel ashamed."
Right.
And like I really. I feel like, again, that's a part of Pete's like learning process and growing process. And I sort of feel like, you know, we've only ever seen him with women with whom he has like massive overlaps of experience. Where like Jess is like, they grew up in the church together, and they have that massive shared vocabulary. And then Allie is a comic, and so they have that massive shared vocabulary. And I sort of feel like if Pete were to go to a sex shop, I don't think he would go with Jess, but if he were to go with, maybe he would.
I think he might, but they would make it a joke, wouldn't they?
They would make it a joke. Yeah, like if he were to go with Allie, they would be doing bits all over the place.
You're right.
And I think that it's really sort of lovely to see that communication, and to like see the two of them sort of having a moment of like what could be friction, and like what could be sort of a scary like fight in an early relationship and have her sort of explain level-headedly. I think it's like one of my favorite things about Kat as a character is that she is so in touch with herself, and she's like so like honest with herself about what she wants, and she's honest with other people about what she expects and what she needs. And I think there's something really empowering about that, about like having the ability to say to your boyfriend, like, what you're doing sucks.
Yeah, definitely.
But not because it just like, but it sucks because it's hurting me, not just like arbitrarily.
Yeah,
you suck all
it's
the
a
time.
vulnerability.
Totally.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, it is a vulnerability, and it's like, yeah, there's something like she's honoring the fact that she like wants to be with him by being vulnerable and like allowing him to know these things about her.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So Mina, I have a question for you. When we got to the scene where Pete opens up to Kat about like, you look just like a porn star. I used to have a monogamous
literally
relationship.
Thinking about that right now.
I was so surprised by the way this scene played out. Were you? I thought this might be the end of Kat and Pete. Like, I love the way this was written and directed.
Yeah.
Were you on eggshells like I was during this scene? Yeah.
I totally predicted she would go and get a vision board and say, yeah, I predicted it all.
Mina's really smart. So.
Pointed to a picture of Prince William.
Yeah.
I knew it. I felt it.
Yeah.
I really wanted to do a picture of Beau Bridges, like a young,
I know.
a young
Or
Beau
Val
Bridges.
Kilmer, lesbian Val Kilmer. Yeah.
Lesbian Val.
That's what Pete calls himself.
He does look like lesbian Val Kilmer.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I thought, I wouldn't want someone to tell me that I look like the porn star version, or that
Yeah, I don't
look
think it
like
would
a
drive me
porn star. So,
crazy.
like, it would bother me, like, I'm
Yeah.
like the second-rate version of a girl you used to masturbate to. Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's like not my favorite.
I don't think it's that flattering. That's why I was like, I thought that your character felt insulted in that clip.
Yeah, well, that's what I loved about how Gillian directed that moment. Was she was sort of like, she was like, when you sit up, like, look pissed. She just was sort of like, don't tip your hand as to what's going to happen. Because I think she wanted people to have the moment that you guys are describing.
She nailed it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I remember at the time being like, there's no way this is going to work. Like, it's not going to make any sense. I'm like, why would I be sitting up and looking furious if I'm actually just thinking like, I have to show him my vision board.
Right.
But I think it does make sense. It's sort of like, like, am I going to reveal this freaky thing about myself to a person that I've only started dating recently?
I guess it's true that Kat, as much as that might annoy her, she'd really appreciate his honesty.
Totally.
Because that's so your character's policy.
Yeah.
That, like, maybe in that moment, if you're angry, you're like, you know what? I can't fault him for telling the truth.
Yeah.
I guess is sort of how I took it.
It's also kind of sweet to learn that he was monogamous with his porn star. Like, I think that's the cutest thing in the world.
It's very Pete.
It's very
Holmes.
Pete. It's Sweetie Pete.
Sweet Pete. Well, speaking of vision boards, let's transition into Pete's professional life this episode, because Kat really kind of, I don't want to say worms her way in, but maybe wedges herself into Pete's professional life.
Yeah.
In decisions that I both kind of questioned and embraced by the way this was played out. And again, I think Gillian did such a good job. That's Gillian Robespierre, guys, who we'll talk about a little bit later in the episode.
Yeah.
But she directed this kind of ambiguously as well, where, like, I don't know if we were supposed to really approve of Kat's decision making, especially she started drinking.
Yeah.
But it played out in kind of a nice way for Pete. Before you speak on it, Madeline, how did you feel about this?
About Mina. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that is your name.
Yeah. I heard Madeline.
He was throwing him around. He was
I'm throwing it all
You know,
around.
okay.
pronouns,
yeah.
So I have mixed feelings about interfering in someone's professional life like that. Because for me, I don't know how I feel like having someone come into it that quickly.
Yeah.
I like to kind of keep things separate. I just think it's like a lot.
Especially after a 3-week anniversary.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the results were great, and her intentions were great. I love that she
think
just
so.
wanted the best for him, and she's like, you have to do this. You can't just be scared and like avoid this at all costs. And then they get front row center, and it happens to work out perfectly. And I love how you're just so loyal to him, and you defend him and say how funny he is, and you kind of are like ripping apart everyone else. That was my favorite scene.
Me too.
But no, I don't like the idea of like inserting yourself in someone else's professional life without their consent. I feel like that's like really sticky territory, and especially when it's something like entertainment or comedy.
Yeah.
A lot of these people have to maintain the facade of being single because it hurts their career if they're seen as they're with someone else. It kind of like drives down their value.
God, really?
So a lot of people don't want to be seen as in a relationship, especially like even with Instagram. Like it kind of kills your following if you're a hot female or hot man, and then you have like
I bet you're
someone
right.
with you.
I bet you're right, because I always sort of like, I recently was Googling James Blake, the singer, the musician. Oh my God, the hat
Fedora
is
on, by
on.
the way. In honor of Pete's professional advancement,
insane.
I wore a fedora. For you podcast listeners, I look like garbage and I'm wearing a fedora in the studio. So
He's
check
wearing
us out on YouTube.
He's wearing a fedora over headphones.
It's
which
great.
is incredible.
Yeah.
But I recently, it was like James Blake like made some beautiful comment about like how we need to stop making fun of men for being soft boys, or so, it wasn't soft boys, but he was sort of like, it's so stupid to mock men for having feelings and emotions, because that's like poisonous, and it means that men don't have an outlet for their emotions. And I read the statement and I was like, hot.
Yeah.
And Googled James Blake to be like, can I marry him? And then once I saw that he's in a relationship, I was like,
Is he seeing Jamila Jamil?
yeah,
Is that right?
which is
Yeah.
actually very cool.
It is
it's
really
like,
cool,
It,
yeah.
like they're like a hot couple, but
I just posted her stuff on Insta. Oh my God, law of attraction, everything.
yeah,
She's
everything
the
is
best.
connected.
They both are.
They're so cool. They're
Yeah.
like such a cool couple, but it did mean that I was sort of like, well, I'm not going to be a super James Blake fan any longer. Like, I'm certainly not going to follow him on Insta.
It
He's-
kills the fantasy.
I know.
You know what it is, though?
I know.
I actually think it's a double standard, because I think I talked about my wife and I both work in the business. I talk about this with her all the time. We got married in August. We're both kind of young for marrieds, but
We're married.
yeah, I know. Is
How
that
old
what
are you?
27, but I'm turning 28 very soon.
Yeah,
but
that's young.
especially in this business. And
Yeah.
what's interesting is like, I was talking about it with her, and she was like, I just don't want to like. I'm really excited to marry you, but I don't want to like professionally affect my trajectory.
Interesting.
And I was like, well, for me, it's the opposite. Where if I'm in an interview and I tell someone I'm married, they're like, oh, he's got his shit together.
Yes.
Whereas if she says it, it's like, oh, she's gonna have a kid and not have her job. So
yeah.
I agree with you, Mina, but I think it's more. I think it benefits men to be bait up professionally, and then I think it actually damages women.
In the same way that like seeing a picture of Daniel Craig carrying around a baby is like the hottest thing in the world.
Yeah, it actually is.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah, and then like I feel like anytime women have children, people are like, but is she a good mom?
Yeah.
Probably not, because she also has a career, and it's like, that sucks.
It really
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you like believe all this stuff, and then you like start spending your life with like a woman, you're like, oh, patriarchy is like super real. Like
Oh,
for
it's
anyone
super-
anyone who
it's super
denies it,
real.
I'm like, you're just so like, do you have got blinders up, because like it's still
Yeah. Well, the only one who ever denies that the patriarchy is real is a man.
the perpetrators, right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
like the worst.
Yeah, they're like, I've never seen it. You're
like,
you're
okay.
doing it right now.
Literally.
Male privilege? I don't have that.
What's that?
I'm treated just like you.
So Mina, you love this scene where Madeline drunkenly calls out all the other comics for not being funny.
Yeah.
I was cringing and loving it. I love when you go, you just like make funny faces.
I know, which is not true.
I know.
It's not true. Jessica Kirson is so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. That scene, scary.
Well, I have to ask.
And comedy is kind of personal too.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Yeah.
subjective. Even though I like
Yeah.
to say no, it's objective. Some people are just not funny, and I don't get why this is even popular for like certain shows that I see. I think it is very subjective because
Yeah.
it's whatever strikes a chord with you and resonates with you that you find funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bits of truth.
Yeah. My sort of favorite moment is when you go see a comedy show or a movie or a play or whatever, and there's like a joke and one person laughs. Because I'm always like, what's the deal with that one?
Right. That's so true.
I want to hang out with them.
Absolutely.
Like, and they laugh like loud. Oh, I love it. I think that's so great. Yeah, but there's always like someone will probably like someone will always be a fan of. Well, I don't know. Maybe this isn't true. I don't necessarily agree with it. I was going to be like, someone will always be a fan of. You'll always have one fan if you're a comedian, but I don't
I feel
necessarily
like
think that's true.
that you
That's, like,
definitely would
charitable.
have at least one person
You'd
who's
have
on your
one.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If nothing else, like your mom.
There's someone. Yeah.
There's someone out there for everyone.
There's gotta be.
The thing I loved about this scene where you're calling out the comics is like a lot of this episode, it was like kind of ambiguous how I was supposed to like read this.
Yeah.
And like, because obviously like you were sort of professionally crossing a line and potentially jeopardizing Pete's career, but like something about Kat like is charming and endearing, and I think it like played okay with these comics.
Yeah, I think it's also, maybe I'm delusional, but this is how I interpret it, is like I sort of feel like there's something cool. They see there's something cool about the fact that he was willing to come do this and like sit in the front row and allow himself to be roasted mercilessly.
Yeah.
And like, if nothing else, it's sort of like, well, he's like, at least he's got a hot girlfriend.
Yeah. And like he's got
if I may be so bold.
Well, they talk about it on the show, and I think like it's that confidence. The thing I loved about your character in this scene is she's embracing it and loving it, and you get called out a little bit too and made fun of, and you're laughing in that scene too.
Yeah.
And it shows that Madeline, Kat, even if she's not in this world, she like respects it and likes it, which is a great, I think, co-pilot to have if you're in a relationship in that career.
She respects it and likes it, but she's able to walk out of that room at the end of the night and say like, that was funny and they're funny people, but there's also a lot of sadness, and to sort of be able to act as this like, I don't know, like Deus Ex Machina thing where she can like yank him out of that world and sort of remind him like, this is not the real world all the time. You know, like the world of stand-up comedy is not the be-all and the end-all.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of times actors say the hardest thing that you're called to do as a performer is to play drunk. Do you think that's true? And how did you kind of navigate that challenge in this episode?
I love to play drunk. I've just done a lot of research on it.
Good. Haven't we all?
Yeah, exactly. I think the hardest thing about playing drunk is that it's like, I feel like the thing that I always heard from acting teachers and directors is the secret to playing drunk is that when you are drunk, it sort of depends, but for the most part, when you're drunk, you don't really want people to know that you're drunk.
Yeah.
So you're sort of trying to keep it a secret. It's the same thing of like when you're crying, you kind of don't want to cry. And so the thing about being drunk is it's like, you kind of have to somehow like just have it be a private experience. And I don't know, but Gillian also was great. Like that was one thing that I really loved, was occasionally she would just like call out and she would sort of be like, you've had one more drink, like or sort of like let's just get a drunk laugh, like give us a little drunk laugh. And it was like, I love playing drunk. It's such a blast. You just get to like slur your words and kind of like
let go,
like
a little
wobble
bit
around. You're sort of like a baby. You become like a baby where you like can't sit up straight all the time, and you're just like, oh, good time. You know, it's great. I love getting to do it. So.
It's fun. Well, it played very authentically in the show.
Thank
I think
you.
so.
I'm so glad.
Props.
Yeah, those were not real whiskeys that I was downing. It was like water flavored with, I don't know, like caramel coloring or something.
Nice.
It kind of tastes like an almond, like you're drinking an almond or something.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. I would recommend it.
Well, I want to move on to this final scene with what was maybe the most adorable moment of television in 2019.
So cute.
Before we do, Mina, anything else you wanted to discuss with comedy, with the Comedy Cellar, before we talk about homeschool?
Oh, okay, that's what I was going to say, yeah. No.
So we have this great moment between Kitty, as Pete calls you, and Pete, where you wake him up super early, God knows when, it's your 4-week anniversary, and you run him outside because your character bought an ad on a bus stop for homeschool.
On a bus?
On a bus, thank you.
Yeah.
So you had to time it right so the bus is coming at the right time.
Yeah.
I thought this was adorable. Mina, I don't know what you thought, but...
I loved it.
Yeah.
I thought it was so cute. I was like,
so
you're
cute.
like the dream girlfriend for any guy.
Yes.
Like,
I think it's so cute. I think that's like a lovely...
act of service.
Yes, totally. Totally. To sort of be like, I'm going to help you visualize your success in a super concrete way. It's like you don't even have to visualize it. You can just see it.
I feel like Kat is the first person to truly believe in Pete.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Obviously, his first wife... why can't I remember Lauren?
Jess.
Thank you.
I know. I just always call her Lauren.
I know. I feel that way too because you have Pete and then you have the actresses and actors who names sometimes are, you know what I'm saying. But Jess, I feel like was fighting against Pete's success because that's not what she wanted for their life. Yeah. And with Allie, I feel like there was inevitably always a sense of competition, even if it was with Pete imposing it on her. So it's really probably interesting for him to have someone in his corner who like earnestly believes in him and wants to see him succeed.
Yeah.
It's different.
I think it's really nice. And it's so important, and I think it is so powerful to like have... Pete has said this, or like some version of this, that he's like, at some point you either need to be your own cat or you need a cat. Like you need that sort of the person cat. You don't need a pet.
You just need a cat.
You need, all you gotta do to be successful is get a little pet cat.
Yeah.
A little fur ball. Like you need someone and it's so hard to do this for yourself, so it helps when it's an external, other person. Like, you need someone who does that, who is such a fan of you and is such an advocate for you, because it's so fucking hard.
Yeah. It's we all know it's the most brutal business that there is.
Oof. Oof. It seems really like I am like pretty, I feel, I was saying to Mina before we started, like, I had never been to the Comedy Cellar before we shot this show. Like, I am not really in the world of comedy. Like, I enjoy it and appreciate it and have friends who do it, but I'm like not well versed and I don't know how it works. Like, until I saw the show, I was like, I didn't know about getting passed.
Right.
I didn't know about like barking in exchange. I didn't know any of this stuff, and it seems so hard, and like in a way kind of maybe even harder than being an actor, because it's like you can be an actor who, there's so many different kinds of acting, but it's like you can't be a comedian if you're not successfully funny. Like, if people don't laugh at your jokes, you're not a comedian, and that's hard because, as we said, like, humor and comedy are so subjective, and like not everyone is going to find the same stuff funny, and it's so
the feedback mechanism is so tangible. Where it's like, if you're doing a play and no one necessarily like reacts, they might be liking it,
right?
But if you're a stand-up and everyone's just listening, it's probably not good.
Horrible. Unless it's some sort of like existential comedy.
There are some of those, that's true.
Yeah, which might exist.
Yeah.
Kind of an interesting idea.
Well, we have to talk about Leaf.
I love Leaf.
Love Leaf so much. We keep trying to get George Basil on this show, but he's been busy.
He's a busy dude.
Mina, do you think Leaf and Jess are on the rocks?
Oh, 100%. He would not be hanging out with Pete that
He also loves Pete, though. Like, I could see him doing this.
100% it's on the rocks. 100%. And, it's not the 7-year mark yet, is it? Because you're the one who knows all the stats.
Right. No, they're not. No, I think they must only be at like 2 years, maybe. Yeah.
So what happens at that point? That's what I want to know.
You get sick of Leaf?
I'm so sorry to tell you that I'm not really an actuary, and I don't know.
You just play one.
I just play one on TV.
Very convincing.
I don't know.
Though.
Thank you so much.
They're definitely on the rocks, though. There's something up. I think Jess is probably over Leaf by now. And there's like this hint of jealousy that I feel from him towards Pete. 100%. Yeah. I'm like so confident with that.
It's interesting. Well, I'm sure we'll get more Leaf later in the season, as well as some more Jess. I want to move on to our special segment, so we have time to chat with you as well, Madeline.
Totally.
But, anything else about the episode that I didn't cover, or that you'd like to cover?
Just one last thing. The homeschool thing cracked me up. That was the funniest premise I have ever heard. It was so stupid, so ridiculous. And then there was also another part of me that was like, oh, maybe this could actually work.
Yeah.
Like, there was a part of me that was like, I wonder if there's a way you could bring kids into your garage and have it be some inspirational...
I love when Ray Romano is like, isn't that a Dateline special? Like, he's like,
To Catch a Predator.
Yeah, like, that is a terrifying concept.
I did forget to mention Ray, but of course, that was a beautiful moment when the vision board was manifested.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
It's so cool. That was so exciting to get to shoot that. And Ray Romano is like such a nice dude.
So low. I've actually gotten to meet him. He's so low key and like unassuming and just like, you should be more of a dick than this, Ray Romano. Like,
I know.
He's just like so nice.
I know, but it's like now we know why everybody loves Raymond, and it's because he's really fucking nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's watch some Dave Attell, guys, and then we'll chat with Madeline after that.
Special, the HBO special, 9 long years to get here. And where do they shoot it? On the set of some kind of gay porno movie. Look at that. Caligula, come on.
This is from 96, by the way.
It's from 96?
Yeah.
Come on. Remember? You know what I'm saying. Yeah, I know you do. Oh, San Francisco, I love ye. But this is such a loud towny toot-toot town, isn't it? Yeah. The loudest thing are the garbage trucks. Do you hear them in the morning with that sound? You know that? Make it stop! Make it stop! Make it stop! Oh, it's going. It's going. No, wait. What is that? Can't they oil it, whatever it is?
All right, that's good. Dave Attell, mouth sounds and comedy. I love it.
He's so good.
He's so good.
I think he's so brilliant. I think he's so funny.
He is. He's such a. We were trying to feature comics with very specific points of view.
Yeah.
And he's definitely shows an example of how like a targeted point of view is so essential for successful stand-up, I think.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Madeline, let's talk about you.
Oh, God.
So this is, I mean, you've had a very long and illustrious career, but this is kind of your first big break.
It's my first TV show ever. I've never been on TV before.
It's
other than like on the local news. When
it's atypical that like this jump happens. Usually it's like you know, I played like the victim in Law and Order SVU, and then I had like a little guest spot.
What the hell?
So can you talk a little bit about like this audition process and why they sort of took a chance on someone who's worked a lot but not necessarily on TV?
Yeah, no, I've done but also you're very sweet to say that I've had a long illustrious career. It's like I've had like a solidly downtown, you know, like low-key theater career in New York City. It still counts. It is and like I'm very lucky to even have that because it's you know, that's not everybody does that. Not everybody can do that. So I'm very lucky. But the way that this came about was like my manager got me the audition, and I went in, and Gail Keller is the casting director who was casting it, and I'd never met her before. And I did the audition, and she was like, do you live in New York? And I said, yeah. And she's like, how long have you lived in New York? And I was like, 6 years. And she said, why don't I know you? And I said, I don't know. and then I left, and then like this weird thing always happens where it's like a week or so goes by and you don't hear anything, and you're like, well, weird. I guess I really misread how that went, because I felt pretty good about it. And then my manager called and was like, they loved you. They want you to go back in. And I went back in and like read with Pete, and also met Judah Miller, who's the showrunner, and Oren Brimmer, and he's also a writer. And Oren Brimmer is also a writer, and he directed episode 4, the next episode, which is a great fucking episode. I'm so excited for people to see that. And so I read with them and like loved them. They were just all so sweet and kind and wonderful. And then they were sort of like not totally sure. They were all really liked me, but they weren't sure because, as you say, it was like, why would they take such a huge gamble on someone who's never been on TV, has never played, you know, gang victim, whatever on SVU, and so a couple years ago, I started doing these things. I would make self-tapes using said shit that Donald Trump has said. I would it started because like I figured out early on that I can't stand looking at him or listening to him, because it's all bad. And but I still wanted to know what was happening, and so I would read transcripts of what he said. And I was reading the transcript of like the Republican debate when there were like 12 people in that debate. It was like an insanely large debate. Yeah. And he was saying the thing about his hands being small, how someone had attacked him for having small hands, and he was like, there's no problem with my hand. And he like really, it was like the lady doth protest too much about his hand size. And I read that and I was like, this reads like an SVU audition side, this monologue that he just gave. Oh my God.
Steve in the booth.
Wow, I had forgotten that you had that power, Steve, and I'm so glad you used it for good and not evil. And so I started making these self-tapes of like myself performing Donald Trump text in various characters. And so we sent those to Pete and to Judd, and it helps that Judd Apatow also fucking hates Trump and saw those and loved them and thought they were funny. And and I think it was also just like I had a really lovely connection with the people in the room. And Pete was excited too, and he keeps on being like you're a real actor, and I think he was excited about having a real actor on the show, which was so sweet. A story that I love that I don't know that actually I've even told Pete this is that there was a moment when he called me to like prep me for the next day. I was like going in the next day, and he called me to sort of like walk me through what we were going to be doing, like what scenes, and also that we were just going to sit and chat, the two of us. And when he called me, I was in a public restroom, and I was like flushing the toilet, but he called and I didn't have time to wash my hands. This is gross, but it's
I've been
fine.
there though.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm not gonna not take this call.
Right.
And so I like answered the phone, but then was very conscious of like everyone else is gonna see me and it's gonna be like, that woman just didn't wash her hands. So I was standing outside of the bathroom with my hands up like I was a doctor who was about to scrub in. To sort of imply, like, don't worry, I'm not touching anything, and I will go back in. And by this time, like, no one who was in the bathroom when they saw me,
really cared.
They were gone. Like, no
They
one
were
knew.
all paying attention.
Yeah,
That's
so-
usually what happens is everyone's looking at us and they're
They
thinking
stop.
about all that.
That's
yeah.
true.
So
That's
it's a
true.
good thing you let everyone know.
Yeah, exactly. The first time I really talked to Pete Holmes on the phone, my hands were just filthy and disgusting. Yeah. And then I did go in, even though I knew that everyone, the people had cycled through. At the end of this like 15-minute phone call, I went back in and washed my hands.
Good, I'm glad.
Yeah, I want everyone to know that I'm not disgusting. I'm not like a total creep. Yeah.
I got that impression at first, so I'm glad you cleared it up, Madeline.
Thank you
That's so
for
great.
giving me the space to do so.
It's such a wonderful debut. It's such a specific
Thanks.
character, and your work is really great. And
Thanks.
we're just so excited for what's next. We only have a couple more minutes.
Meanies.
But Mina, do you have anything for Madeline before we make our way out?
Oh, I don't know. I just really liked the dynamic between you and Pete. Is there anything that happened behind the scenes that was that we wouldn't know about him or like about the dynamic?
You know, I think he is sort of an open book, but like one thing he loves to joke about this too is like I feel like he's constantly bellowing something like keep it light or something because he's like I think he does sort of feel a bit of responsibility to like make sure that people are having fun at their job.
That's very him.
It's very him.
Like hospitality.
Yeah.
And like, he talks about that on his podcast a
Yeah,
lot.
but he really does a wonderful job of doing that. And it's like he knows he like knows how to make people have a good time. And he's so funny. It's so funny. Like there's a scene coming up in I think it's episode 5. It's the episode where I go to meet his parents, which is like a little bit of a fraught interaction, or there's like a part that's a little like we had to do some serious acting.
Good.
And in between takes, he was making up this like insanely stupid song about Rodney, our cinematographer, that was just like Rodney, he wants to go party. And he was singing it in this like high falsetto, and I was like crying with laughter in between every take. And he's just like that. He's just, I think part of the reason like we have good chemistry on screen is because he's just so easy to have good chemistry with. Like I think Pete could have good chemistry with like I don't know, like a tire on the side of the freeway.
It's a two-way street, though. There's something.
Thank you.
I think it's the unexpectedness of your courtship is really interesting as a viewer. Is I think what we're getting.
Yeah.
For me, at least.
Right. We're like not two people that you would necessarily assume would be together. But I think like that's also what I like is that like Kat sees something in Pete that like there's something about each of them that it's not like a one-sided thing. Like he's this sort of like kind, funny, stable. He feels like safe in a way that I suspect Kat does not usually
Find those kind of guys.
Yeah, I think she's probably been with some bad boys.
Yeah.
It's like Prince William and a porn star. It just makes sense. Yeah.
I know. The Prince William thing is so funny to me.
Yeah.
Especially because now that I think about it, I'm forgetting, but in that photo, I feel like it's also one of the things where he's like holding a baby. It's like there's so much to unpack.
It's very loaded.
It's very loaded. It's a very loaded vision board.
Well, speaking of loaded, guys, there's plenty more in this season that we're so excited about. Of course, we will be back next week with episode 4. Madeline, it was so great to have you on the show.
I have loved being here.
Thank you so much. And again, we're like really loving your performance. We're not just goosing you. It's really, really great.
That would be such a mean thing to
I know.
do.
Next week, guys.
Fucking
good thing we lied to her. No, it makes me very excited to see you more on TV because I know you're going to do really cool stuff. And is there anything that is kind of in the works or anything that you can or can't talk about?
Nothing I can talk about, but hopefully some exciting stuff.
Great. Well, if they want to keep up with you, they can do that on Twitter, right?
They can do that on Twitter or on Instagram.
Great.
The handles are the same. It's wise_dumb.
I love it.
I pronounce that wisdom, but other people. Yeah. Yeah, very, very funny. Wise _ dumb. Like
Nice.
my last name and then like the opposite of being wise.
And like the opposite of being wise. I love it. Good thing you are wise. It was great to chat with you today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's been a
Mina,
pleasure.
where can the people find you online?
You guys can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Mina Makes Magic, or go to my website, minawahab.com.
And guys, you can find me on Twitter at Jeffrey C. Graham. I will actually be covering tonight's episode of The Bachelor. I'm on the panel for that show.
Whoa.
I know. We pretty much just shade a bunch of real people for an hour straight, and it's great.
Oh my God.
I for a long time I resisted that I actually liked that show. Then I owned up and I was like, this is one of the best shows I've ever seen.
I've never watched it, but maybe I'll watch your wrap up. And
our wrap up. It's we come with the hot takes, so you should definitely check that out.
I'm
and
scared.
guys, we'll be here next week at 5 p.m. Of course, talking about crashing. One more time, thanks for joining, Madeline.
It's been a pleasure.
Good, and we'll see you guys next week here on AfterBuzz TV.
Bye.
Bye.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.